Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Commission meeting for March 16th, 2021. The meeting is hereby called to order. Before we begin the official agenda, we have a script we read through to make sure that those who are unfamiliar with the way that we are doing business right now have every opportunity to do so. And we appreciate those who are participating as we go through another teleconference meeting being conducted pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20. We ask you bear with us as we use the remote tools. Sometimes we'll have people that have connection issues or other problems, and we would rather have a little bit of dead air as they have an opportunity to connect than to go quickly and end up missing out someone. So just bear with us as we go through that process. Tonight's Planning Commission meeting can be viewed live on the city's website, which is www.cityofvacaville.com, or on cable channel 26. Instructions to participate from a computer are provided on the city's website, and you can connect via the link that is listed on the agenda for tonight's meeting. If you're following along on a telephone and prompted for a participant ID, press the pound sign to be connected to the meeting. If you're planning to participate, please follow along on the telephone or your computer, not on channel 26, because there is a broadcast delay for the channel 26. Callers who wish to comment can raise their hand by pressing *9. Depending upon your individual settings, you may need to then press *6 after you are unmuted by the host in order to open your mic. Computer users requesting to speak can simply click the raise hand button with their Zoom controls. And with that, we are now ready for the roll call. Madam Secretary.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Chair McCauley.
Chair McCauley's here.
Vice Chair Fortney.
I'm here.
Commissioner Aldridge.
I'm here.
Commissioner Beaumont.
Here.
Commissioner Alan Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Brett Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Lightfoot, who will not be joining tonight. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. If you all now please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Baderi, do we have any communications?
Yes, we do. We have one item. It is a letter received from the Vacaville Heritage Council. It is related to item number 9B, the downtown specific plan, our review tonight of the historical preservation guidelines. The Heritage Council's letter is viewable on the online agenda. It has been added there, and you have that letter sent to you as well.
Thank you, Mr. Baderi, and I did receive that email earlier on today. Item number 4 is approval of the agenda. Do any commissioners have proposed changes to the agenda?
Commissioner Beaumont moves to approve.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
I see seconds by Johnson and Aldrich. I will ask the secretary to call the roll.
Commissioner Aldridge.
Yes.
Beaumont.
Yes.
Alan Johnson.
Aye.
Brett Johnson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Fortney.
Yes.
Chair McCauley.
Yes. So the agenda is approved as presented. Item number 5 is business from the floor. This is the time to address the commission with issues that are not on the agenda, but that are within the commission's subject matter jurisdiction. And per both state law and the municipal code, we limit those presentations to no more than 3 minutes. I am looking at our attendees list first, and I do not see any hands raised for attendees who are seeking to address us from business from the floor. Seeing no hands for business from the floor, that item is closed. I do, however, see Commissioner Alan Johnson's hand is raised. Commissioner Johnson, is there, I know it's a little out of order, is there something you need to address right now?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to bring this up for maybe the control room. I'm having a hard time hearing Nancy, but everybody else seems to be about the same volume level.
Okay, thanks, Alan. And I know I've heard a little bit of an echo with her, so I can hear, but a little bit of a fade on that. Thanks for bringing that up. We're done with business from the floor and on to item number 6, which is the consent calendar. The only item on the consent calendar is the minutes from our February 16th, 2021 meeting. Do we have any proposed amendments to those minutes? See no proposed amendments, I will ask the secretary to call the roll on a vote to approve the consent calendar.
Commissioner Aldridge.
Commissioner Aldridge, you're still muted.
Sorry, I had barking dogs. Yes.
Commissioner
That little wiener
Beaumont.
dog. They're evil. My old wiener dog's name. I used to call her evil wiener. She was evil, man. And I moved out. I left with my mom. She loved my mom, hated me.
Can we please finish with the vote?
Okay, I will come back for water because I have no more hands.
To
So,
continue with the
Madam
vote,
Secretary, so far the only vote that I've heard is for Aldridge.
Commissioner Beaumont,
Yes.
Alan Johnson,
Aye.
Brett Johnson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Fortney,
Yeah.
Chair McCauley.
Yes. Our consent calendar is now approved, and we will move on to item number 7, which is public hearings. Item 7A is the Best Western Hotel, and I believe Mr. Arube is going to make the presentation. Before that, I know it started to become a habit of ours to ask if there's been any ex parte communications on this item. I have had no communications outside of the staff report on this item. Do any of the other commissioners have ex parte communications they wish to report right now? See no hands raised or mics unmuted. Vice Chair Fortney, your hand is up. Vice Chair Fortney's hand went down. I'll assume that was incidental rather than an ex parte. And at this point,
No, I'm sorry, Chair.
Go ahead.
Chair, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, yes, I did have a quick conversation with the architect of the project this afternoon.
Okay, great. Thank Mr. Fortney for reporting that. Any other ex partes? Seeing none, I will turn things over to staff for the presentation.
Thank you, Chair McCauley and members of the Planning Commission. The item in front of you tonight is the Best Western Hotel. This is a proposal for a new hotel over at 1420 East Monte Vista Avenue. Next slide, please. So this request is a plan development application. And as I've mentioned, it's for a brand new hotel at 1420 East Monte Vista Avenue. Currently, there's a Best Western Hotel at the site. The application also includes two other parcels, and we can move to the next slide, please. This is a vicinity map of the area. The project site, as I've mentioned, includes 3 parcels located at 1410 and 1420 East Monte Vista Avenue. Project site also contains an undeveloped parcel of land behind those parcels. Project site is located east of Allison Drive, north of I-80, and south of East Monte Vista Avenue. The adjacent neighbor is Panda Express and El Pollo Loco. Across the street, you have a car dealership. Also, you have the shopping center where the Nugget Market is located. Next slide, please. Project summary. So this project, it's going to be built on a 1.67 acre site. The site is located on the general commercial zoning district. and it's located in Area G of the airport land use zones. This is a proposal to build a new 4-story hotel. The hotel will have 94 rooms. The building, it's about 55,000 square feet, and the project will provide 94 parking spaces. So 1 parking space needs to be provided for each room. The proposed exterior finishes of the building include stone veneer and cement plaster exterior finishes. And as I've mentioned, this is a planned development. The reason for the planned development, it's because in order to design a hotel project on this particular site, the applicants are requesting some variations in the city's standards. The first variation is an increase to the allowed floor area ratio from 0.30 allowed to 0.75. Request to increase the building height from 40 feet to 52 feet, and a request to reduce the required landscaping along East Monte Vista from 10 feet to 4.5 feet, and along the freeway right-of-way from 12 feet to 2 feet. We'll be talking about those items in a later slide. If we can proceed, please. This is the exhibit to go over the site plan. As mentioned, this project will be built in 3 existing parcels. One of the parcels is currently occupied by the existing Best Western Hotel that was built back in 1965. The other parcel currently it's occupied by the former Vacaville Scuba building. And the third parcel used to be the former Allison Drive freeway overpass, but when Allison Drive was realigned to its current location, the parcel was created and remained vacant and landlocked by the other 2 parcels. So this development will incorporate the development of the 3 parcels. One thing to point out in the site plan is that this project will improve access into the site, as currently there's 3 existing driveways, 1 for the Scuba building and 2 for the Best Western Hotel. This development will improve access because there will only be 1 commercial driveway on the site. The site plan includes all required improvements such as the parking that is required for the hotel, the trash enclosure, and landscaping. If we can go to the next slide, please. As mentioned before, this is a planned development application that includes variations to the city standards. The first standard that we will look at is the floor area ratio. Requirement is that 0.30 gets developed and the applicant's asking for 0.75. The commercial district development standards do allow applicants to request an increase in the floor area ratio when there's low peak traffic, when there's public utilities that will adequately serve the use and that will not negatively impact the current utilities such as the sewer and the water system, and when the building is compatible with the commercial area. In this case, all of those are met and staff is supportive of that variation in standard. Another standard is the building height. The general commercial zoning district allows for 40 feet. The applicant's requesting for 52 feet. Again, the commercial district zoning development standards allow for the applicants to request a variation in building height of up to 70 feet. In this case, the applicant is only asking to be at 52 feet. Staff has reviewed this request and we're supportive of the request because the building, the new proposed building will sit at approximately 40 feet behind the freeway right-of-way, whereas the current building sits approximately 10 feet behind the freeway right-of-way. The new building will open new view corridors from the freeway. Also, it will provide for better fire access, and the new building will also be fire sprinklered, which will be safer than the current existing building that does not have any fire sprinklers. The third item is the reduction in landscaping setbacks. The applicant is requesting to reduce the landscaping setback from 10 feet to 4.5 feet along East Monte Vista Avenue and from 12 feet to 2 feet along the freeway right-of-way. Staff is supportive of this because the applicant is providing additional landscaping to offset the reduction in other areas, such as the right-of-way adjacent to Allison Drive and all of the right-of-ways adjacent to the property. Furthermore, staff is requiring the landscaping plan to include landscaping on all areas behind the sidewalk and in between the sidewalk and the decorative fences and masonry walls that the applicant will be installing for screening. Next slide, please. This slide, it's the representation of the elevations for the proposed hotel. These are the elevations facing East Monte Vista Avenue and facing the freeway right-of-way. All elevations of the building will include the decorative stone and the cement plaster finishes. The building will also include colors to complement the existing colors of the adjoining restaurants. And staff feels that this building, it's a well-designed building that will be better looking and more attractive than the existing development on site. If we can go to the next slide, please. This slide has the elevations that will be visible from Allison Drive and from the freeway and East Monte Vista Avenue as you approach the site going west. Again, the applicant has included both cement plaster and decorative stone in this elevations to provide for a better designed building. Next slide, please. This is a color rendering of a Best Western hotel, such as the one that is being proposed, with the exception that the colors and some of the exterior finishes will be different, since the applicant is adding the decorative stone veneer to the building to provide a more attractive building. Next slide, please. This exhibit is the proposed landscaping plan. As mentioned, the applicant is asking for reduced landscaped areas along the freeway right-of-way and East Monte Vista Avenue. But the applicant is also providing landscaping beyond the property on the city's right-of-way. Also, the applicant will be installing decorative fencing and walls to provide better screening of the parking lot areas. Next slide, please. As mentioned, the hotel is located in Area D of the Nut Tree Airport land use zones. In Area D, hotels and motels are permitted uses. In 2019, the Airport Land Use Commission removed a 2-story limitation that hotels and motels had in Area D. This limitation is no longer applicable to Area D. Therefore, a 4-story hotel at the site will be appropriate. Also, the hotel meets the required building heights for the airport and the required densities for the airport. Next slide, please. This project is categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. This project qualifies for a Class 32 categorical exemption. Class 32 is an exemption that applies to infill development projects. This project is an infill development project, and the city can find that this project is consistent with the general plan and the development code. The project site is also less than 5 acres, and there's no value for endangered or rare or threatened species on the site. Also, the project will not result in any significant effects to traffic or to utilities, and the project will also be adequately served by all utilities and public services from the city. Next slide, please. In conclusion, staff supports the project because the project will comply with the city's general plan. It will also comply with the zoning code by approving a plan development and approving the variation in standards. Project will be compatible with the adjoining commercial uses and will provide a well-designed building, site plan, and landscape plan. This project will also provide for additional employment opportunities in Vacaville. Next slide. With that, I conclude my presentation and recommend that the Planning Commission approves the categorical exemption and the plan development requests for the Best Western Hotel at 1420 East Monte Vista Avenue, subject to the conditions of approval. The applicant is also in the call if the Planning Commission has any questions for the applicant or staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to the applicant and members of the public, I'd like to see if any planning commissioners have questions for staff on the report or the presentation just made. I don't see any hands. I do have a couple of questions before we go to the public. And I'm going to start on page 15. Item number 3, the scale of the building, talks about the height of the finished floor compared to the sidewalk on East Monte Vista. But I think we don't see the finished floor so much as we see the top of the parapet. Do you know how much the building will, at the top of the parapet, be above Monte Vista Avenue? Is it what, 5 feet, 10 feet, kind of similar in scale? What do we get there?
The building, when you look at the building from East Monte Vista Avenue, you will be looking at approximately 48 feet, because the building will sit, I think, 5 feet lower than the grade at East Monte Vista Avenue.
And so it's a fairly bulky building, but we're approaching the Allison Drive overcrossing, and on the left, we've got Travis Credit Union. It's really not going to be something that sticks way up above the surrounding hillside and stands out. It's going to blend in fairly well with the surrounding elevations. Is that a fairly accurate statement?
Yes, that's an accurate statement. If you are on Allison Drive is at a higher elevation, and therefore you will be able to have a better view of the building. But you'll be able to see that part of the building sits behind or sits below Allison, and only about 20 to 25 feet will sit above Allison Drive.
Okay. So my other question is on page 26 under the findings for variations on standards. A1, we make findings that the project meets the approved standards for parking and building setbacks, but I don't think we're asking for any exception to the parking standards. So why is parking in there if we're not making a finding related to parking?
Can you repeat the page again, please?
Page 26, under variations to standards, A1. Says the proposed project meets the findings for approved alternative standards for parking and building setbacks. Are we making an exception to parking, or should that not be in there?
That should not be in there.
Okay.
Sorry, that's a typo.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something on that. Again, I'll ask if any of the other commissioners wish to raise their hand and ask questions of staff at this point.
I don't know how to raise my hand. I just know how to unmute my.
Fair enough, Commissioner Aldrich, go ahead with your question.
Yes, I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the fact that there's 96 parking places and 96 rooms, and wondering where the employees are going.
Zoom meeting for the planning commission.
Correct. Yeah. So the development code requires one parking space for each room. I believe the architect might be able to better answer this question. I think that the code takes into consideration perhaps that the hotel will not be occupied 100 to 100% capacity most of the time, since there's always rooms that are rotating. But the land use and development code only requires one parking space for each room.
Okay, thank you.
That seems like a good segue to go to the public hearing. So I'm going to go ahead and open the hearing for members of the public. Traditionally, we give the applicant or the applicant's architect or engineer the opportunity to make the initial comments, and then we go to other members of the public. And I see Mr. Sesser has his hand up, and he's the architect. So, Mr. Sesser, go ahead with any comments you have. Mr. Sesser, you show yourself as muted right now.
Yeah, on mute.
We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay. First off, to get right to the question, that every municipality I've worked on a hotel, I've always number of rooms equals the number of parking spots. A lot of this is people arrive in one car but will rent 2 rooms. People will arrive by other transportation means other than automobile, and they'll be renting a room and maybe using taxis or Ubers or different modes of transportation. And it just seems to always work out really well that if they just match the number of rooms with the number of parking spots, it's never been a real parking problem at any hotel. There are exceptions to the rules that, you could have a problem at some time, but I think I haven't really seen a problem with that. I really enjoyed working on this project because we also worked on the Panda Express and the El Polo Loco, and that was put in, and we're just kind of keeping the same setback standards that those were built to when those were approved so many years ago, and kind of completing the whole little island that's kind of left over by the continually widening of Interstate 80, Monte Vista, and the overpass. I working with Public Works and Planning on getting permission so that the Best Western staff could maintain the landscaping on the overpass is kind of a real fun added, because that way it's all kept up to the higher standards that Best Western wants to keep it to. And that way it relieves Public Works of some of their maintenance requirements, and then also allows us to do more landscaping and keep the whole site more in line with the standards of the hotel. This was a difficult project. I'm working with Panda Express and El Polo Loco, and their site was a real difficult project, and this wasn't any different. And working with fire department and making sure that all their access requirements are met, and Public Works, and trying to minimize driveways on Monte Vista. And I think staff did a great job in coordinating all the little difficulties that with the airport commission and the open space land requirements, by us taking more landscaping and keeping more open areas open and free of building. I think it made everybody happy that this is something that's better for Vacaville, and I agree with them as a resident here. And I'm really looking forward to seeing this project built, as Saul said in his states that it's going to open up some view corridors so people can see more into Vacaville at that location that the city's invested so much money in when they built the overpass there. So if anybody has any more questions, please ask.
Thank you, Mr. Sesser. Do any commissioners have questions for Mr. Sesser, for the project architect? I see Commissioner Beaumont's hand raised. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I just noticed on page 65 from the architect that has the site development standards exceptions, and they're all listed there as planned except one, and that is the proposed building height says 60 feet. And I'm just wondering what happened to the plan to get it down to 52.
Well, that's probably me originally listing 60 feet, because actually it'd be 59 foot 10, because when you build a building 60 feet, it's a different set of OSHA regulations and your cost of construction goes way up. And so probably early on in the approval period, I listed it at that. But when we got all Best Western standards, we were able to do it with their standard 4-story building is 52 feet. So we just stuck with that. So that's probably something I just forgot to change.
Okay, great. I appreciate that.
Any other commissioners with questions for the architect? Don't see any. I will go to see if any other members of the public wish to address the commission on this item. If so, now's the time to raise your hand or indicate to the secretary that you wish to speak. Madam Secretary, I don't see any hands raised. Do you have anything for me?
I do not.
Okay, it does not appear that we have any members of the public wish to address. So I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. We'll go on to commissioner comments and a motion at this time. Before I go to those, I do have one note for staff. On pages 24 and 25, under item number 4, on the findings, there's several times where it says staff is supportive of. I don't think we make our findings because staff is supportive. That goes in the report, but I think we should go ahead and modify the findings, not just to remove that parking exception, but to remove the reference that says staff is supportive and simply say the building will be set back or the building does meet the floor area ratio standard. So I think that's a cleanup we need to make, is to remove that staff supports. That's the only other thing I have. Are there other comments, or is somebody ready to make a motion on this? Commissioner Alan Johnson.
I'm ready to make a motion if nobody else has comments or questions.
I don't see any other hands up, so go ahead.
Okay, I make the motion that we approve this project as requested. I think it's a great project.
Do we have a second?
I will second that motion.
I have Commissioner Aldridge the second, and Commissioner Fortney was the almost second. Go ahead, Secretary, and please call the roll.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Alan Johnson,
Aye.
Brett Johnson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Fortney,
Yeah.
Chair McCauley,
Yes,
and checking that my sound is better.
your sound is better.
Thank you.
Mr. Baderi, what's the disposition of this?
The Planning Commission's action is final unless appealed within 10 days of tonight's action. And so it would stop at this point unless an appeal is filed in that time period.
Great, thank you very much. We'll now move on to item number 8, which is business items. 8A is the General Plan Transportation Element Update and ECAS. And it looks like this is a notice of an environmental document. Is Christina making the presentation, or you, Fred?
Chair McCauley, I'll be making this presentation, and there is no actual presentation involved with this item. What the staff would like to do is simply report to the Planning Commission and to the public that as of today, the city has published a draft supplemental environmental impact report for a project we've been working on. The project is an amendment to the general plan transportation element to add policies regarding vehicle miles traveled, the state of California's new standard for how to measure traffic impacts in environmental studies. And additionally, the project evaluates an update to the city's energy and conservation action strategy, which is the city's climate action plan for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That plan was adopted approximately 5 years ago when the general plan was adopted, and is ready for its first planned update to modify standards or add standards and strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we wanted to make the commission and the public aware that as of today, the city has published the draft environmental impact report that analyzes the environmental effects of the transportation evaluation changes and the ECAS, or Energy and Conservation Action Strategy update. An environmental impact report is circulated for a 45-day public review and comment period, and that is intended to allow the public time to review the environmental impact report to ensure that the report addresses the environmental impacts of the project, the two documents that I mentioned. And the notice that you see on the screen is also available on the city's website. It establishes the comment period as March 16th through April 29. The location to receive comments is indicated on the announcement that you see on the screen, and again can be found on the city's website, so that any written comments can be directed to the city's project manager, Christina Love, during that comment period. Additionally, we did want to advise the commission and the public that we will also accept comments at a public hearing at the Planning Commission's meeting in April. And that would be on, checking my dates, I believe that is April 20. And so at your next Planning Commission meeting in April, we will hold a public comment time period for folks who have had a chance to review the environmental study and are ready to provide their comments, spoken comments to the Planning Commission and the staff. So with that, I conclude my comments and be happy to try and answer any questions on the process for reviewing the EIR.
And Fred, before I go to comments from the commission or the public, I want to make sure I understand. Tonight's meeting or discussion is about the process, but it's not about the content. The content will be discussed in 1 month. Tonight is just looking at the process. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. With that in mind, do any of the commission members have questions for Mr. Baderi regarding the process of review of this environmental document? I see no hands up, and Commissioner Aldrich has not unmuted, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the public and see if there's any members of the public. I see several attendees. Do any of you have questions or comments on the process on this environmental document? I see no hands up. Commission members, this is not an action item, so unless there's a last-minute attempt to get my attention, which I don't see, it looks like we, Commissioner Beaumont, your hand's up. Go ahead.
Yeah, this isn't about this though, Chair. It's about the Best Western Hotel and the motion that we passed. Is the general motion enough to approve everything that's in the recommended action motion? That's just a general question.
I will actually ask staff, both Mr. Baderi and the city attorney, to address Mr. Beaumont's question. I know we were done with that item. So Doug, before we do that, I want to make sure we're done with item number 8A.
Great.
Before we go back. So seeing no other hands or questions on 8A, and there's no action, I'm going to say that we are closed with 8A, and then I can go back. Staff, we had a question on the content of the motion on 7A and exactly what it covered. And Commissioner Beaumont, I don't know if you want to restate that, if it was clear to staff what the commissioner's questions were.
Well, I think Commissioner Johnson just said he wanted to move the motion as shown or something as approved in the writings or something, but we didn't spell out the approval of the categorical exemption and a planned development. I'm just wondering if the general motion is good enough to approve what's in the actual recommended action.
Okay. Mr. Baderi, do you want to address that?
Yes. So I believe the motion does address appropriately the items in the resolution. The resolution itself does address the categorical exemption finding and the approval of a planned development. So I do believe the motion does appropriately address the action items that were required for the project.
Okay, I just wanted to check before we move too far. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see the city attorney indicating any disagreement with that. So I think between Mr. Baderi's expertise and the city attorney's concurrence, we're good there. In which case, let's move on to item number 9. 9A is the Land Use and Development Code Update Airport Land Use, and it looks like Mr. Bavand will be making our presentation. Staff, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. So the item for you tonight is really a brief informational, task for us to just tell everybody where things are at with the code update, but more importantly, what next steps were taking place for this code update, which is related to the airport land use compatibility. Next.
Payment, hold on for a sec. I see
Yes.
Commissioner Beaumont's hand. Is that up new or, okay, it's down. Go ahead, continue.
Okay. Next slide, please. So for folks who are not familiar with the airport land use compatibility plan, what you see here is really the zoning for the city of Vacaville. The lines that you see with the letters A, B, C, and D, these are the different airport land use zones that exist in the city. And in terms of importance, A is really where the center of the airport operations are. And as you go further out, there's more relaxed development standards for density, for types of uses and things like that. So for example, the project that you just heard, Best Western, is located in area D, which certainly allows a different set of uses that areas A, B, and C don't allow, in different densities that those internal zones don't allow. So what this really does is the land use compatibility maps or plans for both the Nut Tree and for Travis Air Force Base were created to not only protect airport operations as they are vital to different cities in the area, but also to ensure health and safety for development around the airport areas. So that's why we have a different set of standards within the airport land use plans that affect things such as, again, housing density, types of commercial or industrial activity around the airport. Next. So this is the same map with just an aerial, as you can tell. I mean, if you look at it, you'll see where most of the development is, or the outlying areas compared to where the airport is. And that is, of course, by design. So this is, again, just intended to give folks an idea of when we look at projects, one of the things that we look at, in addition to any policy plan development standards or any zoning development standards, we look at the airport compatibility plan to see where the project is and what sort of uses are allowed or not allowed there. Next. So again, just giving everybody an update of where we're at with the code update. We're still reviewing everything. All the internal comments are still being generated. While we're doing that, we were able to take some element of the plan to the Airport Land Use Commission last year. So last November, we made a sort of informal presentation to the Solano County Airport Land Use Commission to let them know about our code update, what was changing, what wasn't changing. Generally, they were supportive of our efforts. What they recommended was to have a third-party evaluation of the draft code and compare it to the airport standards to make sure that they are consistent. So the city hired Mead & Hunt Aviation Consultants to prepare that consistency evaluation. They did, and what their response was in terms of where things were consistent or not. Generally, they felt that the draft code was consistent with both the Nut Tree Airport and Travis Air Force Base land use plans. Next. What they did recommend are items related to our existing code and where there's some gaps or gray areas to address consistency. And some of it, for example, our code right now doesn't identify hotels as not being permitted in Zone B. So one of their recommendations was, hey, when you do your draft code, make sure you insert this information. And that's something that's really essential to the development review process. When we look at a project, not only do we look at what's in our code with respect to airport land use compatibility, we actually review the actual airport land use compatibility plan that the airport prepared, which is basically the same thing. It just has more details. So we do look at a lot of different documents when we're looking at compatibility with airport operations, and some of the recommendations that were identified by Mead & Hunt are sort of pointing staff in those directions to make sure that we clean up some of those items. So that will happen. We are still, as I mentioned, going through our own internal comments and evaluations of the code. But what we saw from Mead & Hunt is is feasible for us to move forward on and make those changes once we come back to both the Planning Commission and City Council for the formal review of the project. As it stands, we are planning to go to the Airport Land Use Commission in April, and we're not going to have the set of changes that Mead & Hunt recommended, and we've indicated to county staff that we do intend to include those recommendations, but we're just going through a number of changes and evaluations right now, so we're going to do everything all at once. And so we'll see on April 8th how they feel about that. They may want, they could certainly make the determination that based on Mead & Hunt's report and based on what they see in the draft code that everything is consistent, or they could send us back and say, make those changes and then come back to us. So that's certainly one of their options. But as I mentioned, just want to give everybody an update on where things were at. And this is sort of the recent section that we're working on. So we want to share that with the Planning Commission. That's really it for my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and Fred is here as well.
Commissioners, do we have any questions for staff? I don't see any hands up. I will ask Mr. Baderi, since this is an information item, is this one that it would be appropriate to go to the public and ask for comments?
Yes, I think it would be appropriate. If there are any comments, we definitely would appreciate hearing from those. If there are members of the public who have comments on the draft code, since we are intending to, as Payman mentioned, go to the public hearing at the County Airport Commission very soon, and we would be coming back to the Planning Commission after that. So we would appreciate any comments that any folks have to offer. Thank you.
And let's do that right away. Are there any members of the public? Right now I see 4 attendees listed. And I don't know if the secretary has anybody on hold from the phone, but I see Wendy Brecken has her hands raised. We generally try and like to keep comments limited to about 3 minutes, but we have a small group and this is important. So I won't pay any attention until it says 5 minutes instead. And with that, Ms. Brecken, go ahead. You still show yourself as muted, Wendy.
Hi, this is Wendy. I just have really one question. How does the noise of the airplanes, how does that relate to the zones, you know, A, B, C, D, and how does that affect the airport land use compatibility?
Staff, would you like to address that?
Certainly. So in terms of land use compatibility zones, what they really focus on are more the physical developments and densities to make sure that people are not put in the path of danger as sort of their proximity to the airport. The noise that noise from airplanes, I mean, with the Nutry Airport, it's much less than your typical large scale airports that you have, such as Sacramento or anything similar to that. The city has its own noise ordinance that projects are required to comply with. But in terms of land use compatibility, it's really more related to controlling the physical developments that occur to make sure structures and people are out of harm's way.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Wendy. Are any other members of the public wishing to address us on this item? Madam Secretary, anybody on the phone that is seeking to address us on this?
Not at this time.
Back to commissioners. Any questions or comments for staff, or are we ready to move on? I see no hands raised or microphones unmuted. So it looks like we're done with this and ready to move on to item 9B, which is the Downtown Specific Plan Historical Preservation Guidelines. And it looks like Ms. Hayes is making that presentation. Tyra, go ahead.
Good evening, Chairman McCauley and members of the Commission. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the Downtown Specific Plan design requirements and guidelines for the Historic Preservation Overlay District. Now, this is another one of our Downtown Specific Plan informational meetings. And the whole purpose of these meetings is to keep both the Planning Commission and the public informed of our work to date and to help create familiarity as well as opportunities for input as we create the document prior to publishing the draft document. So tonight, to begin tonight's presentation, I would like to introduce Maya Amakai. She is a planning technician in the Advanced Planning Division, and she helps me on a lot of these larger projects, including the Downtown Specific Plan. So with that, I would like to turn this over to Maya.
Good evening. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the Main Street Historic District. Preservation guidelines for the district were written in 1996 and have not been updated since. The Downtown Specific Plan does include updates to the guidelines to further protect and preserve our historic buildings. The boundary for the district, however, will remain unchanged. Next slide. And some reasons for historic preservation include creating a sense of place, connecting to history, aesthetic interest, and respect for architectural evolution, among other things. Next slide, please. When considering what to preserve and to what extent various factors are considered, these considerations center around the contribution each building and each block makes. This includes how many era-defining features are present in the design, as well as how many original features are present. Vacaville has examples of different architectural movements, which I'll walk through now. Next slide, please. Here we have the former Bank of America at 500 Main Street. It's currently office space for a legal firm. This building is a good example of the Beaux Arts architectural style, which originated in France. This is a revival style that uses many elements from ancient Greek architecture, such as columns and capitals. Facade details show the typical 3 main planes and includes a decorative frieze. In the Western United States, this style was mostly used for civic buildings. Next slide, please. At 300 Main Street, we have a good example of classic revival architecture. This is the old Carnegie Library, currently serving as the Chamber of Commerce. Like Beaux Arts, classic revival includes many elements from ancient Greece. This building includes Corinthian columns, a prominent triangular pediment, and an elaborate cornice. This style was also primarily used for civic buildings. And this library was actually one of 1,689 Carnegie libraries built in the US between 1883 to 1929. Not all of them were neoclassical. Next slide, please. At the 400 block of Main Street, we have a group of buildings in the Italianate style. This style was largely used for commercial and residential buildings. The massing allowed for higher intensity use. In cities, buildings often covered almost the entire lot and were 2 to 4 stories high. Because much of California was initially settled in the late 19th century, many of our historic downtowns feature this style. Like neoclassical architecture, elaborate cornices and symmetrical organization of windows typify this style. Next slide, please. Art Deco is another style found throughout California. It was popular during the Roaring 20s when a lot of development took place. This style features the use of new materials at the time, such as decorative metal and glass. It's characterized by extensive geometric shapes used in patterns. Often you see zigzags, triangles, and floral bursts, as well as sharp angles in contrasting colors. This building is at 301 Main Street. It is the former post office. The detailing in the doorway is currently partially covered by the awning. Next slide, please. Here at 313 Main Street, we have Streamline Modern. Streamline Modern was a transition period to the modern style. In response to the Great Depression, this style focused on sleek efficiency and took inspiration from new industrial designs, most notably from the ocean liner. As you can see in this image, large planes and strong lines were the preferences of this time period. Next slide, please. By the early 20th century, modern architecture was in full swing. This movement rejected ornamentation and believed that form should follow function. Modern architecture became dominant after World War II and remained until the 1980s. It is characterized by historical massing and car-oriented design. Most buildings were 1 story high. The roofs are flat, and most of the facade is used for large reflective windows. This building is at 438 Main Street. Now that we took a walk through downtown, I'll turn it back over to Tyra. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maya. I'd like to point out just one point of clarification. The old Carnegie building located at 300 Main Street was formerly used not only as a library, but also as an office for the Chamber of Commerce. It is currently home of Sonoma Springs. That's one of our new breweries located in downtown. Next slide, please. So we're mainly going to be focusing on buildings tonight, but I would like to let everyone know that historic resources can be more than just buildings. They can include sites, landscaping, structures, objects, or even markers. Now that said, our existing municipal code does identify historic structures as those structures listed either on the National Register, California Register, or the local register. One thing I did not note at the very beginning of this presentation is a document that we have shared with the Planning Commission and the public as part of the staff report is technically a work in progress. So we do not have a comprehensive listing of all the buildings downtown in terms of what register they are located on. That is something we are currently working on. But that said, I can tell you that we do know that the city of Vacaville has 2 buildings located within the downtown area that are located on the National Register of Historic Places. Those would be the original town hall located at 618 East Main Street. And then we have the Buck Mansion located at 301 Buck Avenue. Next slide, please. So this is an example of where we do not have our comprehensive listing of all of our buildings identified quite yet. However, we do have other buildings located within downtown that are located on the California Register of Historical Resources. And essentially, these are those buildings that have significant history related to California's history and or architecture. The majority of our downtown historic preservation overlay has been designated locally, has been designated locally on our local register as being significant to the history of Vacaville. Next slide, please. We can go ahead and skip this one. Next slide, please. So now we're going to take a very high-level review of some of the design requirements and guidelines that are identified in this document. So this document is the update of our existing 1996 Historical Main Street Design Guidelines document. One of the biggest differences in the 2 documents I've mentioned is our new document we're reviewing tonight is very specific in identifying what constitutes a requirement versus what is simply a guideline or suggestion. So within this document, we do designate that all exterior changes will be subject to a staff level design review. It does differentiate between both requirements and guidelines in each section that is addressed within the document itself. And it provides information pertaining to exterior colors, secondary facades, awnings and balconies, roofs, exterior lighting, outdoor areas, signage, and public spaces. Again, some of these sections of the document have not yet been filled in, but the vast majority have. I would like to spend a little time talking about the section that relates to exterior colors. So regarding exterior colors, we do have both requirements and guidelines. An example of a paint requirement would be the exterior paint shall be based on historical paint palettes as identified in various locations that can be read in the document. It also states as a requirement that secondary paint colors may highlight architectural features and shall be compatible with the primary color of the building, as well as the color palettes used in the neighboring buildings. A paint guideline, as compared to a requirement, is a little more soft in its language. In terms of a guideline, it notes that the exterior color shall be muted, natural in color, and its accent color can be greater in tone or brightness as appropriate to highlight specific architectural features. So on this slide, we're showing 301 Merchant Street. Very recently, this building was purchased and it has been updated. Previously, it was home of Eagle Eye Engraving, and now it is a very recently leased building. And I did note it was identified on public media today, so I think we can share this with you. We do have the Pink Door Photography Studio relocating into this location soon. They do anticipate in occupying both floors. By way of historic information, the top floor of this building was once created to be an apartment, and under other sections of our downtown specific code, could be converted back into an apartment at any time, subject to certain review criteria. However, the photography studio has noted that they would like to use both floors for their business. But here we have an example of how the building still has the muted colors as its primary color, but they did use accent colors to really call out the details around the windows and the doors, as well as the cornice. Next slide, please. So one really important portion of this document addresses how can we help the property owner or the merchant who would like to update the exterior of the building. This can be found in Chapter 5 of the document. So in general, what this section does is walk the applicant through the process. And it tells them, in terms of planning your project, please be sure to review the following based on the criteria identified. In general, and again, this is a high-level review, it recommends that the applicant identify what style of building it is, identify the period of significance. That's a reference to the different types of architecture that Maya reviewed with the Planning Commission. Then they ask the applicant to look at and to identify any documents that may identify any kind of historical associations between the building and the city of Vacaville. From there, it goes into design criteria, and it does encourage repairs over replacements, and it does encourage other things such as it encourages, as a guideline, that these buildings maintain the areas that are open to the public. They want them to retain their historic character. Now, other areas of the building that might not be accessible to the public will not be subject to this requirement. Next slide, please. So, as identified in our 1996 Main Street Historical Guidelines document, as well as in this draft document we are reviewing tonight, we identified that we have two types of buildings in downtown and within the Historic Preservation Overlay District itself. We have contributing buildings, and then we have non-contributing buildings. Now, a contributing building within the Historic Preservation Overlay District is a historic building that has been identified in one of the three registers of historical resources we reviewed earlier. The non-contributing buildings are newer buildings that were built at a later time and or are not located on one of those registers. That's not to say that these buildings do not serve a purpose and help create the environment and the feel of the historic nature of the overlay district itself. So what this document does is it does provide both requirements and guidelines for these non-contributing buildings, as well as any infill new construction that may come into the area. This document does not require that these non-contributing buildings, should they be amended on the exterior, or that any new construction buildings be built to look historical in nature. What it states is there should be enough similarity between, and let me back up, there should be enough in common, exterior speaking, and aesthetic between the historic buildings as well as these newer buildings themselves so that they are compatible with one another. That could be done numerous ways, including but not limited to color schemes, materials, overall style, things of that nature. So here on your screen, you will see 620 East Main Street, as well as 618 East Main Street. So here we have a side-by-side comparison of a building that's located on our National Register of Historic Places, and that would be the building shown on the right-hand side of your screen. That is the original Town Hall Center for the city of Vacaville. And then on the left side of the picture, you're going to see a newer building, which was built in the early 2000s. This is home of the Vasquez Deli, which also includes 3 apartments on the second floor. As you can see, there are enough architectural details and coloring to make these 2 buildings compatible with one another. There's no competition in terms of the aesthetic of either building. This is essentially what is summarized within the document being presented tonight. So in addition to providing that type of, in addition to providing those types of requirements and guidelines, the document also addresses ways that people can incorporate either accessory dwelling units or accessory structures on sites, whether they be historical sites or non-contributing sites. They talk about how the buildings should be compatible with the surrounding buildings. There's talks about massing a building, materials, finish, things of that nature. Essentially, we want to respect our past while also being able to move forward with our future without having competing interests. Next slide, please. So again, this is one of our informational meetings that we've held with our Planning Commission over the past year or so. There will be 1 or 2 more before the publication of our draft downtown specific plan, which is slated to occur in late May or early June. Following that publication, we will also be publishing our draft environmental impact report addendum, which is being prepared for this document. As mentioned earlier, there was reference to certain projects having to go to the Solano County Airport Land Use Commission. This is one of those projects because as other parts of the downtown specific plan that we've discussed previously, we are proposing various general plan and zoning land use designation changes. So anything requiring a general plan amendment and zoning changes is required to be reviewed by the Airport Land Use Commission. Now, the vast majority of downtown is not located within one of the airport land use compatibility zones, so we do not anticipate any concerns being mentioned by the commission itself. However, we will be taking that to the Airport Land Use Commission in the future. A date has not yet been set. Ultimately, we would like to bring the entire document to the Planning Commission and the City Council for adoption hearings in September of this year. So that concludes my presentation. As Director Buderi mentioned earlier, we did receive 1 piece of correspondence in relation to this document, and that was from Ms. Elisa DeCaro. She is the treasurer of the Vacaville Heritage Council. I don't know if she's on the line or not, but I did want to mention to the Planning Commission that the consultant team who is helping staff on this project did reach out to the Vacaville Heritage Council to solicit their input on this document. So with that, I do invite the Planning Commission and the public to ask any questions they may have and or to provide any comments or direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyra. Do any of the commissioners have questions for Ms. Hayes? I see Commissioner Alan Johnson's hand up. Go ahead, Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Chair.
Tyra, real quick, in the letter we received late this afternoon, it suggested expanding the boundaries of this district. Does city staff have any thoughts on that?
Well, I can tell you very early in the process, we had looked into potentially expanding the existing boundary to incorporate a larger portion of Buck Avenue, which is on the western side of our boundary. But at that point in time, people who were attending our public outreach meetings did not show interest in having their properties designated as historic. I can say that we did not consider expanding the boundary in any other direction. However, after receiving this letter, we will be reaching out once again to the Vacaville Heritage Council to find out more information that goes behind this request.
Okay, thank you. And pros or cons to the city and the community, either way?
I honestly don't know. I do believe that we would have to reach out to the various property owners to see whether or not this would be something that they would be interested in having designated for their property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Any other commissioners wish to ask questions of staff before we go to the public? Commissioner Beaumont, go ahead.
Yeah, Tyra, great presentation. I just wondered why the map on the second page isn't a current map that shows the town square instead of Bernard Street.
I love the fact that you know your history and you know what Bernard Street is. The reason that we have the older map that comes from the 1996 document is because the current document we're reviewing tonight has not been completed. So normally we would not show this document to the Planning Commission at this point and stage in the process, but we thought the importance of sharing this information sooner versus later outweighed having a more up-to-date map. We will have a new map for you the next time you see this document.
That's great. Thanks, Tyra.
Any other commissioners with questions for staff? Don't see any hands up, though there will be a second chance. I'm going to go to the public and see if any members of the public wish to comment to the commission on this item. If so, now would be the time to raise your hand in the Zoom app. I see no hands raised. Madam Secretary, anybody on the phone who wishes to address the commission?
None at this time.
Okay, Wendy Brecken has
Chairs.
just raised her hand, so I'm going to go ahead and give Ms. Brecken an opportunity to address the commission on this. Wendy, go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, this is Wendy Brecken. I just had a question of Tyra. If you're comparing like cities like, I'm just thinking Walnut Creek and Pleasant Hill because I'm familiar with them, how they've kind of updated areas that are like downtowns. Are we saying that, you know, with maybe different facades, or is this not possible because we have so many different historical buildings and styles to kind of make it look updated at some point? You know what I mean by more modern?
So if I understand your question correctly, the answer would be we want to preserve our historic character of just the areas located within the Historic Preservation Overlay District. Mm-hmm. Now that's limited mainly to 2 blocks from perhaps 3 blocks of Main Street. And there's a little bit that extends a little south onto Merchant Street. The remainder of the downtown could be modern in design.
And what are the roadblocks or obstacles in planning the, you know, more modern design outside of the historical area, like facades and things like that?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question.
What are, because we haven't really updated the area outside of the historical preservation area. So what needs to happen? Like, what are the obstacles to make that happen? Or is that the downtown specific plan? Is that what that is?
I'm Unfortunately, we don't have the boundaries of the downtown specific plan on this presentation, but there are other chapters of the downtown specific plan that have been reviewed with the Planning Commission, and there's more to come. What we've actually tried to focus on is to remove barriers to updating buildings and creating new buildings downtown. Now, these are the areas outside of the Historic Preservation Overlay District. So to the maximum extent possible, we're trying to make the development entitlement process easier for developers. So rather than requiring all projects come to either the Planning Commission and or council, we're trying to handle as many as possible at the staff level. So we're trying to provide ways to not only incentivize, but to also encourage current property owners and future developers to help reinvest into downtown, not only through the uses themselves, but also from an aesthetic perspective.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Brecken. I don't see any other hands raised here. Madam Secretary, anyone on the phone who wishes to address the commission?
Not at this time.
Okay, then I will bring things back to the commission members and see if there are any final comments on this issue. Again, it's information. We don't have any action to take, but any more comments from commission members on this? Seeing none, I think we are ready to move on then to item number 10, where we start to get into the status reports from staff. So I'll turn things over to Mr. Baderi, who will then have staff members make their presentations. Fred, go ahead.
Thank you. So first we'll have the report from Jay Salazar, the chief building official, going through the building division's activity report. Jay, are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Director Baderi and honorable commissioners. This is a building division update, but I thought I would include a few interesting items to kind of get you a flavor for how the districts are going to, or what the historical nature of the various newly created election districts affect our community development operations. So just to give you, and here's what we're going to go over tonight. Going to take a look at code enforcement related to community development code enforcement, the historical distribution of actions in districts real quick. And what we do in community development, at least in the building division, is we enforce the provisions of the Uniform Housing Code and the Dangerous Buildings Code. They have their own enforcement mechanism and appeals processes. Then I've also included a little bit of information about the historical distribution of land use allegations in the district area. And then of course, our typical information that I presented in the past regarding the inspection activity in February, the February applications and the permits issued. And then a little last slide is on our ECAS summary. So as you all remember, this is a kind of a generic representation of the election districts that are now formed and labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and their colored boundaries. So with respect to data that we've been collecting for the last 6 years on uniform housing and dangerous building allegations, which represents our code enforcement activity in community development, the allegations are distributed across districts, and I created a pie chart to kind of show you a relationship between the districts and what types of allegations we get, the volume of the allegations we get over the last 6 years. As you can see, District 5 and District 3 have the highest percentage of allegations. And if you go back to looking at the map, you can see that District 3 and District 5 are in that general area. District 3 is in the middle of the city, and District 5 is on the western portion of the city boundaries. And going back to the pie chart, so you can see that, and both of those districts, District 3 and District 5, have aging inventory in terms of building structures. Moving on to the next slide, I'm just going to remind you of what the boundaries are again. And then the slide after that talks about the land use allegations that we've received over the last 6 years and their distribution among the districts. In this particular case, we have 3 districts that are relatively close in volume in terms of the allegations we receive and we investigate regarding violations of the land use code. District 5, District 3, and then District 2 are the districts that currently have the highest volume in terms of percentage of allegations. And then they're followed by District 1 and District 6, with District 4 being the fewest. So that kind of gives you a sense of what we as community development staff deal with. This is, I don't deal personally with or professionally with the zoning land use allegations. That's the current planning staff that handles that. And so, but that's kind of a distribution of what they're looking at based on the new district boundaries. Moving on to our inspection activity for February, we completed a total of 1,128 inspections with 3 inspectors in February. And as you can see by the bar chart, the trend is slightly fewer inspections than last year. Moving on to the next slide, I just have a visual description of the inspection and permit activity per district. And so you can see here, as you look at District 1, our inspections in that district in February were 257. And in that district, we issued 77 permits. And then as we go to District 2, it's 40, and again, 252 inspections, 40 permits, 252 inspections. District 3, slightly fewer permits and about half the number of inspections as the previous districts, 134. District 4, the fewest number of permits issued for that area and about 109 inspections. And then we picked back up in District 5 with 42 permits issued and 173 inspections. District 6, 62 permits issued and 252 inspections. And there's the next slide just shows the very same information I provided on the previous slide, but it just equates it directly to each district with the little summary of permits and inspections, permits issued and inspections for that district. Going on, the February inspections were 1128, as I said, 74 plan reviews. And this slide just simply presents what the workload of each inspector in the month of February. Again, this is the month of February, the one point I want to point out is Greg O'Kander, who is also a inspector and a plan reviewer. So he had 207 inspections, but completed 74 plan reviews during the month of February. And then following up, and the last slide related to inspections is related to single-family residential units that received their final inspection, which means that people could move into their new home that they just purchased. And that was 27 single-family homes received their final inspection approval in February. One slide that I reserve for the Planning Commission is this trend line of permit applications as opposed to permits issued. And so this gives us a sense of what the economic activity, at least in terms of inspection activity, is going to be like in the future. So as you can see in February, we have slightly fewer permit applications as compared to last February. And that's consistent with our current permit cycle. We expect to see a slight reduction of permit activity, both in applications and issuance, coming up over the next 18 months or so. And then it will start to increase after that time. The next slide is related to permits issued. And in February, as you can see, compared to last year, we issued slightly fewer total permits, 279 versus slightly over 300 last year at the same time. So in terms of permits processing of our staff, community development staff, Kristen Botello completed and processed 33 single-family dwelling units in February, which means that she tracked and ensured that all of the issues associated with development agreements and related conditions of approval were addressed prior to issuing those permits. Another point of note is 59% or almost 60% of all the permits we issued in February were issued online. And then our permit staff, Debbie Fowler and Rebecca Diaz, processed a separate 132 permits in February. Then last slide is related to our ECAS strategy. We've developed a system to make the issuance of solar permits as fundamentally simple and convenient as possible. We issue them online, and that is really in response to our original ECAS strategy that we developed 5 years ago in trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. As you can see, there is a downward trend, which is very typical for this time of year. We always see a cycle downward on solar permits. This particular month, though, it was pretty interesting. We issued the same number of solar permits this month in 2021 that we issued in the February of 2020. And that's all I have for my update. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And if you ever have any questions in the future, please feel free to contact me individually at my city office phone.
Commissioner Beaumont, go ahead.
Hey, Jay, good report. Just wondered, you had 59% online processing last month. Do you have a goal as to what you really want to hit for the online processing?
No, we don't have a goal or any type of public policy direction with respect to percentage associated with online processing permits. What our public policy goal in building is related actually to my graduate work that I completed back in 1993. I did a study on compliance, on building code compliance. I mean, how do you motivate people to get building codes? And do you do that through code enforcement, or do you do that through lowering fees, or any one of those things?
Jay, I'm going to stop you for a sec. I'm getting some background noise. It sounds like an old Atari game or something playing in the background. If everyone who's not actively speaking could please mute yourselves. And I'm going to ask members of the public to also please check to make sure they're not still broadcasting so that we don't have an Atari game in the middle of your presentation. Sorry for the interruption, Jay, and go ahead.
Thank you. So as I was saying, our main goal in community development is related to the graduate work I completed in the early 90s, where I discovered that where I did a rather extensive study on permit issuance and what motivates people to obtain building permits and how many people get building permits, and took a look at a number of strategies, public policy strategies, which included code enforcement and fining and all the kind of carrot and stick things. But what I discovered in my research and my analysis, because I collected data, was that convenience is the most important variable associated with permit issuance and code compliance. The more convenient that a person makes a process, the more compliant the local community people will be with respect to obtaining permits. So that was part of that thinking went into developing this online program with respect to solar permits, because it worked out really well with our ECAS strategy and wanting to reduce greenhouse gases.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. Any other questions for Mr. Salazar? If not, Mr. Baderi, who's the next presentation?
I think we'll have Tyra, if she's ready for that, to just go over the advanced planning activity.
Hello again. So the Planning Commission is aware of the latest tasks we've been working on as it relates to our downtown specific plan. And once again, by way of reminder, we will have the draft downtown specific plan in front of the Planning Commission probably in June. So in addition to that, we are working on the Green Tree project. There have been some proposed site revisions to the project, and as such, the city's consultants are currently making changes to the water, sewer, drainage, and traffic reports. Earlier today, you heard a little bit about the vehicular miles traveled CEQA analysis and the notice of availability being published. We have that. It is now within its 45-day public review period. We are continuing to begin the next housing element update. On March 4th, the County City Coordinating Council, or the 4 Cs for short, reviewed the proposed methodology to distribute the RENA numbers amongst the county and the 7 Solano County cities. They did approve that methodology, and that methodology has now been sent to the Department of Housing and Community Development for two of the grants are meant to help fund any funding gaps for the housing element update and any related housing policy documents. The third grant is a competitive grant with a maximum award of $800,000. And if awarded, this grant would be used to create something similar to the downtown specific plan for the city's other priority development area, which is located around the intermodal transit stations located on Allison Drive. I believe that concludes what the Advanced Planning Division is currently working on.
Questions for Tyra? Seeing none, Mr. Baderi, I think we're on to current planning.
I think we are. Albert, are you ready for that one?
Yes, I am. Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. I will be providing you an activity summary of what kind of current planning projects we've been reviewing during the month of February. Starting us off in District 1, we approved a couple of projects. The first being Premier RV Storage. That is a parking lot located on 1.3 acre parcel off Flynn Road.
Albert, you're all but impossible to understand. It sounds like there's a real metallic echo coming from you.
Oh no, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but there's still that echo. I also see Commissioner Brett Johnson has his hand up. Brett, what have you got?
A suggestion, perhaps hit mute on whatever device is streaming the broadcast. Will help with the interference, I think.
Albert, go ahead. Give it a try.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
It just, for me, it's not a very good connection. It sounds like you're in a large metallic container. There's a buzz behind you. But do the best you can. If not, maybe Fred can take over.
Okay, well, I'll do my best. So the Premier RV Storage identified on the map is a storage project that's going to provide storage for households and vehicles. Also include most South Field.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Albert, I can make out about one word in 10 that you're saying. Sorry, I'm not getting anything out of the presentation.
Chair McCauley, I can perhaps do a brief summary, not quite as detailed as Mr. Enault, but I can go through a few of the main points if that would be helpful.
Less detailed, but at least we can understand what you're saying. Go ahead, Fred.
Excellent. So Albert was pointing out in District 1, a couple of projects that are being worked on now. The Premier RV Storage Facility, this is out near Quinn Road and Vacaville Parkway, Crescent Drive. So it's adjacent to the, or very close to the existing RV sales use out there. There's also some work being looked at for the Horse Creek soccer fields. This is within the Centennial Park area. And other than that, you can see the distribution of plan reviews going on in the district. They're not labeled. What those are, plan reviews would be the staff reviewing building permit plans for projects that are either seeking permits soon to construct or maybe are under construction now and are being out there ready for inspections. In District 2, this is the east side of the city. There's some remodel work going on a Taco Bell, or being reviewed for a Taco Bell on Elmira Road near Nuttree Road. And another residential project in the Roberts Ranch development area called Wild Hawk. And this would be single family homes within the Roberts Ranch area. In District 3, ongoing activity, the project you see listed there is the Allison Apartments. This is on a site directly adjacent to the transit center. There is an update related to city council action. Last week, the city council did decline to move forward with a development agreement with the potential housing developer. So at this point, we may be waiting to see how that project is going to proceed. So there may be some hold up on whether that one comes forward to you sooner versus later. But it is a proposed affordable housing project on a city-owned property adjacent to the transit center on Allison Parkway. In District 4, no current planning projects being reviewed at the moment. There are a few plan reviews going on, perhaps related to some of the permitting that Mr. Salazar was talking about. District 5, again, the same, no active plan reviews, project reviews. The council, yes, the city council did last month initiate a zone change request for a property on Butcher Road in District 1, in District 5, which will consider a zone change to allow residential development for a small property on Butcher Road. It's not shown on the map yet, but there is something in the works in that area. And then finally, in the south area, District 6, project review underway. A request for a development agreement extension for the Southtown project. The Southtown project is the residential project arranged around the Magnolia Park location. And their development agreement was originally approved, I believe, in 2005 or 6. And so there are time limits apparently coming into play, and they'd like to seek an extension. That type of project would come to the Planning Commission for a recommendation to the City Council, and then would go on to the council. And I think Albert may have worked on the issue there with the sound. Albert, is there anything else you'd like to add to my quick review?
Well, first, I guess check to see if my microphone works. Does that work?
Quite a bit better.
Okay. All right. Fred, thank you very much. That was great. The only thing that I would probably add was during February, we're still seeing a lot of home occupation permits coming in, and we helped around 90 development-related inquiries. And a lot of the plan checks that we did during February had to do with plot plans, mainly in the Vanden Meadows areas, specifically the Parkside subdivision, which is advertised as Cerrito, and then also in Vanden Estates, the Saratoga. A lot of that's going on in District 6. And then also a lot of other accessory structures, so swimming pools being done for single family homes. But Fred pretty much captured everything that has been going on during February.
All right. Thank you, Albert.
Excuse me, I guess I was muted during all that. Fred, I think the next one up is your report for the director's report, and I hope you would include on that what's going on for the appointment of new commissioners and how that might affect our April meeting.
Thank you very much. Yes. So, yes, I do want to report on City Council actions pertaining to the Planning Commission and the tentative schedule of future Planning Commission items. I'll address the City Council actions first, and in particular, maybe the most important item for the Planning Commission. So we do have 4 of the Planning Commissioners who are whose terms are ending this month. So, and that those are Chair McCauley, Vice Chair Fortney, Commissioner Alan Johnson, and Commissioner Brett Johnson. The City Council anticipates making appointments to the Planning Commission, I believe at their next meeting, so before your April meeting. And one thing we did realize is that at this time, both the chair and the vice chair, Chair McCauley and Vice Chair Fortney, have reached the end of your terms on the Planning Commission. If you are not reappointed to the Planning Commission by the City Council, we would recommend that the Planning Commission tonight select one of your members who is not up for reappointment at this time to serve as an acting chair in the event that no other current members are reappointed, that the current officers are not reappointed. And that role would be just to call the April meeting to order, after which the new commissioners would be seated and the full commission would be able to select your officers and move forward. And so we would recommend that this evening under the commission comments section, which follows this report, that you select one of the 3 planning commissioners who is not up for reappointment, and that those are Commissioner Aldrich, Commissioner Beaumont, or Commissioner Lightfoot, to serve in that very brief role to call the meeting to order next month in the event that both Chair McCauley and Vice Chair Fortney are not reappointed at this time.
Okay, Fred, we'll handle that then under commissioner comments.
Thank you.
Based on your recommendation. So go ahead.
Okay, so reporting on City Council actions related to Planning Commission items, I did mention in the current planning report that at the Council's last meeting, they did deny a request from our Housing Services Department for approval of a disposition and development agreement with a potential housing developer for an affordable housing project on the site next to the city-owned site next to the transit center. So we had been planning to move forward with a project review to bring a potential project to the Planning Commission, potentially in April. At this time, I think we're still evaluating, or rather the developer is still evaluating whether to try another project idea to move forward. And then at their next meeting on the 23rd, the City Council will be hearing the Villages at Vanden Meadows Development Agreement extension request. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of this late last year, and it is now ready for presentation to the City Council. And this is a portion of the Vanden Meadows specific plan project that has not started residential construction yet. And then the City Council will also be hearing an item related to a request to sell alcoholic beverages at a proposed liquor store at the southwest corner of Nut Tree and Alamo. And this is an item that did not come to the Planning Commission. It's related to the Alcoholic Beverage Control Department requests for city determination that an alcohol sales license is okay to approve. That item was called up to the city council by a member of the city council, and so goes directly to them for a hearing. But I thought the Planning Commission would like to know that that land use issue is under consideration at that southwest corner of Nut Tree and Alamo. Then taking a look at, one other item. So in April, the first city council meeting in April, at this point, the city staff are anticipating being able to provide the city council with a report on an item related to downtown development, and that is a potential program to install parklets within public spaces downtown. These are small outdoor dining areas or outdoor gathering spaces that you'll see in a lot of cities. You see them actually on Main Street now, some very temporary installations that allow some of the small businesses a chance to use the outdoor space to continue conducting business when their occupancies have been limited by the current health requirements. So we're taking a look at different programs and how those might work. If the council decides to have us move forward with something, there may be components of the specific plan for downtown that you see addressing these. Moving on to the tentative schedule of future Planning Commission items. For your April meeting, we anticipate 4 potential items. One is a proposed apartment project on Peabody Road at Cliffside. So right where the Cliffside Drive meets Peabody, the old Ford dealership site, as it's often known as. So that property was designated in the general plan for a potential high-density residential development site. We have been working with a potential apartment developer for that property, and we may have the project ready to present to the Planning Commission for an action in April. As I mentioned earlier, on one of the earlier items, we will also hold a public comment hearing on the VMT, Vehicle Miles Traveled, and ECAS, or Energy and Conservation Action Strategy, EIR, the Environmental Impact Report. And that will be an opportunity for folks, if they've had a chance to take a look at that environmental report, to comment to the staff and the commission on whether the report accurately and adequately addresses the potential environmental effects of those changes to city policies, and any comments that they would like us to address before we finalize the environmental study. We will have another update report on the downtown specific plan for you. And then finally, we're hoping to have a brief presentation on something called a project called Open Counter. And that is an online information system that would allow, that we're working with a consulting firm to install, that would allow people to look up zoning online, to more easily access the code requirements that would apply to any property online, and to easily obtain information about how permitting processes would work. And so one of those measures that we're trying to implement to make it easier to use city systems for obtaining permits or development information. And if we've proceeded far enough, we'd like to show that to the Planning Commission next month. That, I think, is what we have on the list coming your way.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Baderi? And let's move on to getting things wrapped up with our commissioner comments, with the first item to be to make Commissioner Beaumont, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to, since I'm one of the 3 and Commissioner Lightfoot's not here, I would like to defer to once Chair Aldrich to take that role if needed, which I doubt it will be. Thank you.
I appreciate that. We have a recommendation for Commissioner Aldrich. Jan, are you okay with that?
Yes, of course.
Okay, then I'll
Very much for your vote of confidence.
Okay. I don't think this is an official action, but I'll just ask if any commissioners would recommend we do otherwise. Please state now. Commissioner Alan Johnson, you had a comment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, I would also support Jan. She was a good chair for quite a long time. My only comment is I watched the city council and how they handled the situation when they had new council people take over, and they did what was, I call a bifurcated meeting. The old council did the first part of the meeting. They swore in the new council members, and then released the old ones. Is that something that we might want to consider?
Fred, do we have our terms expire at the end of March, or is it at the next meeting? What's the way to proceed?
I believe the commission's terms end in March. And so I would have to check the commission procedures just to double check that. But if that were the case, then I think having this possibility planned for might be a very good thing to have in place.
And let me see if I can state, and we should probably take this as a formal action with polling the commission, that the recommendation has been made that Commissioner Aldridge be appointed to act as chair at the beginning of the April meeting in the event that none of the existing officers are reappointed to the Planning Commission, and that her charge is to bring the meeting to order so that new commissioners can be sworn in and then new officers can be designated. Does that meet the kind of the intent of the commissioners for what we would do?
Commissioner Beaumont, that's exactly what I think we intend to do.
Okay, then I'm going to ask the secretary to call a roll on that just so we can make sure we're on the record for this.
Commissioner Aldridge,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Alan Johnson,
Aye.
Brett Johnson,
Brett, you just muted yourself.
Oh, sorry. I said yes.
I'm sorry, is that a yes?
I did it again.
Thank you.
Yes.
Vice Chair Fortney,
That's a yes.
Chair McCauley.
Yes. Okay, we've got that one taken care of. Commissioner Beaumont, your hand is still up. Did you have anything else you wish to say under commissioner comments?
No, I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. I hope that I will be addressing you as a commission member a month from now. If not, the last 4 years have been a blast. Those are the only comments I have. Other commissioners that wish to comment? Brent Johnson's the only one with his hand up, and so I'm going to turn things over to Brett. Go ahead, Brett.
Thank you, Chair. My term is up. I have submitted a letter of resignation effective at the end of the month because I will no longer be able to serve, even if I was to be reappointed. My family's currently in the process of moving out of the area, and so I wanted to thank the fellow commissioners for everything over the past 2 years working together. It's been it's an exciting and fun process to be a part of, and I am thankful to definitely be able to opine on the helping shape the community, and wanted to thank staff for everything that they've done to kind of further the Planning Commission and the city of Vacaville as well. So I appreciate it, and thanks again for everyone.
We're a better community for your having served, as well as I would put that for all the rest of you. So in honor of everyone who has ever served on this Planning Commission, our meeting tonight is adjourned. Good night, Vacaville.
Good night. Thank you.